final video in the Art of the Mixdown series, we're going to talk about that all elusive finishing line. And this is a point that people do genuinely struggle with. It's like, how do you know when your mix is finished? What is it that's actually going to stop you, especially if you're not that experienced? What's going to stop you just mixing and tweaking and pushing and changing until you potentially get to a point where your whole mix starts falling apart and you stop trusting your own ability to exercise any judgment? So here's a few tips. This is the way that I like to kind of think about these things. My goal at this stage is to ask the question, is it close? Am I getting to the point where nothing is really jumping out of the mix at me as a kind of glaring error? And what I like to do at this stage is sort of decouple slightly from this studio mindset of, oh, that sound is slightly too loud, that sound is slightly too quiet, and instantly reaching for a fader and changing those relationships. Because if you think about it, if you're constantly doing that, you never really cultivate this big picture mindset of how's the track sounding as a whole. So what I like to do is I like to take a step back, go old school analog with a bit of paper and one of these items, which is a analog pen. And then I sit down, just take a load off, close my eyes and listen to the track from start to finish. One thing that actually helps with that sometimes as well is simply hiding the sequencer altogether so that I'm not instantly drawn to something visual which might strike me as something that needs immediate attention. The whole point of this exercise is you're not jumping in there, you're not tweaking one thing and thereby changing the relationship with something else and all the rest of it. So what I want you to do is just to listen to the track from start to finish and just make notes, just jot down anything that stands out for you, any of those reasons why you may feel that you're not actually getting that close, like that lead line is too loud, or the drums I can't hear the hi-hats, or the drums are simply too up front, or I can't hear the bass line at certain points in the track. So you just make a note of all of those jobs, then give the track another listen, just go from start to finish, because that also allows you to get the bigger picture kind of context of, this is the way the kind of middle section relates to the verse section or whatever. And then another little tip that I have that I've created on this project, and I don't always do this, but I did this for a tutorial that I was giving a while ago for Producer Tech. And I quite like in Ableton the ability to create these locators which show you the different sections of the track. So once you've done this exercise and you've jotted down any notes, it's quite a good exercise just simply to be able to jump from one section to another section within the track and just make sure that the relationship between them is kind of consistent throughout the tune. So you're not kind of going from an incredibly quiet sort of first groove to a totally distorted and slamming, final play out section. And then, when you're doing this as well, think of it as a listener would. So I like to call this the listener journey. And the listener journey is obviously, with music being linear, you're going from point A to point B. Point A being the beginning, point B being the end. And during the course of that, you're going to have certain expectations, like a lead sound's going to come in and you're going to expect it to kind of carry the track perhaps for a period of time, or a pad sound's going to come in and you're going to expect it to have this warmth, this kind of glow to it, to just make your spine tingle and just uplift you a little bit. And as you're going through as a listener and you're on this listener journey, you'll notice that one or two of those things are going to slightly disappoint you. Like the lead sound, it's like, that's just lost in the mix somewhere, or perhaps the opposite. It's just, that's jarring, it's too loud. Again, just make a note of it on your piece of paper. Once you've done that, you should have like a little to-do list of a handful of jobs where you believe that there are some fundamental changes that need to be made. At that point, allow yourself to go back into the sequencer, Make those changes as you have it on your list. So fix those things that need fixing. And then what I'd advise you to do is just to take a break. Take 20 minutes out, go elsewhere, do something different, make a cup of coffee, whatever it might be, and then come back fresh and simply repeat that cycle. Just repeat the exercise. Listen to the track start to finish, hide the sequence if necessary, and just make a list of any other items that may be standing out. And hopefully you'll find that your list is shrinking all of the time that you do this. And then you should get to a point where you have nothing on your list, that you're relatively happy. And that's the point where you can genuinely say, this is pretty close. And at that point, what I like to do is I like to export the track as it is. And this is without any kind of mastering sort of plugins at the end of the chain. We're not talking about mastering here. We're simply talking about mixing the track down, allowing for between -6 and -3 dB of headroom at the top of your mix. And so you're just kind of listening to the track back, exporting it. And now what I want you to do is just to go and listen to it on a handful of other systems. So I'd recommend a phone, just a phone speaker. I always find a really valuable tool, because you'll find that if the bottom end, for example, is overly loud, you'll get some muffled sort of crackling distortion happening. And also a lot of your top end, when the bass comes in, will suddenly dip down in volume. So it's really, really valuable to listen to this music on tiny speakers. I also like to listen on my laptop. I like to listen in the car, and that's especially useful because I'm focusing on something else at the time. So the music's almost being fed into my subconscious rather than it being very much in the forefront of my conscious mind. I'll also listen to it on a stereo system, usually in the kitchen, and usually I try to make sure that I'm doing something else at the same time. And that could be having a conversation with somebody, it could be cooking some food, washing the dishes, but something again where the music is just in the background. And then finally I'll listen to it on a set of very good earbuds, and I'll do that when I'm doing a bit of admin, and I'll perhaps wait until the next day to do that as well. So just don't be afraid to give yourself a little bit of space at this point. And I realise that you're probably in a hurry to finish this thing, to play it to your mates, to get it out there. But this is really the point where you just want to take a deep breath and just step back for a second and just follow this procedure. And what listening to it on these different devices will do is it will just give you each time a fresh perspective. You might find, for example, make notes of this as well, you might find on your phone listen through, on your phone speakers, that perhaps the bass is just completely inaudible, whereas on the hi-fi it sounds, extremely bassy. And the chances are it's because you have a little bit too much kind of sub or bottom end on the bass and not enough overtones within the bass to kind of really bring out that sort of lower mid-range frequency. So as a result, you may have compromises to make. You may have a couple of decisions to make whereby, you decide you're going to reduce the level of that kind of sub slightly and just up the level of the mid-range a little bit and just compromise so that it sounds good on the phone and good on the hi-fi. And ultimately, your goal with these mixdowns is to create a mix that sounds good on everything, that translates to any system. That is always the holy grail. That is the goal that you're going for. And if you don't listen to it on different systems yourself, and you're stuck in your kind of studio space listening to it over and over again, you will be able to convince yourself that it sounds absolutely amazing, and yet 50% of what you're mixing against in that environment may just be the sound of your own room. So that's why that's super important. And when you get to that point where you've gone through these exercises, you feel like everything is as good as it can be and it's as balanced as it can be, and the listener journey has been as seamless as it can be, that's the point where you commit, you export it, and you send it off and you get it mastered, or if you're mastering it yourself, then you master it yourself. Anyway, I really hope that helps. I hope you've enjoyed this series on the art of the mixdown. There's lots of detail in it, and I've tried to keep the whole thing as simple as possible. You know, in my mentoring sessions, I do go into some of the problem-solving aspects of creating mixdowns and creating music that people experience. And, you know, if you are looking for a little bit of additional help, I'd really recommend investigating the world of mentoring, because I do believe that that kind of hands-on approach to an experienced individual within the business kind of helping you with your own production, it can really genuinely turbocharge the speed at which you're able to learn, rather than you constantly feeling like you're going down this like rabbit hole of YouTube content. And, you know, in many ways that can be its own form of procrastination. Anyhow, I really hope you've enjoyed this series. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and also check out my website at mixingmasteringmentoring.com, where you can find out all the information you need to know about my one-to-one mentoring services, as well as my mixing and mastering. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.